At this May Day rally, the International Committee of the Fourth International is making the most urgent warning to workers and young people throughout the world about the growing danger of fascism. The horrifying March 15 terrorist attack on two mosques in Christchurch, in which 51 people, including young children, were killed and dozens more injured, was the product of the systematic promotion of right-wing extremism internationally. The gunman, Brenton Tarrant, was not a disturbed lone wolf as depicted by police, politicians, and the media. He was a highly conscious fascist who actively supported racist and anti-Muslim groups in Australia and in Europe, which have been emboldened by the lurch to the right in official politics. Unlike in the 1920s and 1930s, fascism does not yet have a mass political movement, but it is being deliberately cultivated by the political establishment, state agencies, the corporate media, and right-wing academics. As the ICFI warned in January, quote, "The growth of far-right and fascistic movements, including the revival of anti-Semitism, poses immense danger to the working class. Under conditions of deepening capitalist crisis, unprecedented levels of social inequality, and preparations for world war, the ruling elites are resurrecting all the political filth responsible for the worst crimes of the 20th century." End quote. Like other far-right terrorists in the United States, the Christchurch shooter was inspired by the 2016 election victory of President Donald Trump. His manifesto calls Trump a symbol of white renewal because of his statements encouraging racist violence and attacking Mexican and Muslim immigrants as, quote, "invaders." Trump is only the most blatant personification of a global phenomenon. In Australia, where Tarrant grew up, successive Labour and Liberal national governments have demonised refugees and imprisoned thousands in appalling conditions, while participating in criminal US-led wars in Iraq, Afghanistan, and Syria, encouraging the growth of racist parties such as One Nation. Extreme nationalist parties are in government in Italy, Poland, Hungary, and Austria, and have entered parliaments in many other European countries, including in Germany, where the fascist Alternative for Germany is the main parliamentary opposition in the Bundestag, and the coalition government has adopted its anti-immigrant policies. New Zealand's Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern responded to the Christchurch massacre with hypocritical denunciations of racism and appeals for kindness and compassion towards Muslims and immigrants. She has been depicted virtually as a saint in countless articles in the American, British, and Australian media, as well as in New Zealand. This international campaign to glorify Ardern is based on the most shameless lies and distortions. Its aim is to cover up the fact that her Labour Party-led coalition government and all the parties in Parliament have created the conditions for the growth of the extreme right by supporting wars abroad and whipping up xenophobia at home. For more than 100 years, the Labour Party has advanced anti-immigrant and nationalist policies and viciously opposed the internationalist program of socialism to unite workers in every country against the capitalist and nation-state system. Following the Russian Revolution, the Labour Party supported racist white New Zealand legislation to severely restrict immigration from China and other Asian countries. The first Labour government, elected during the Great Depression in 1935, had an openly anti-Semitic immigration policy and accepted only a small handful of Jewish refugees fleeing from the Nazis in Europe. Like social democratic parties throughout the world, in the years following the 2008 financial crash, New Zealand Labour scapegoated foreigners for the sharp drop in living standards brought about by brutal austerity measures which have been supported by all the parties in Parliament. Jacinda Ardern herself campaigned in the 2017 election demanding a major cut to immigration by up to 40%. And while Labour and the trade unions scapegoated migrants for low wages, unemployment, and the refusal of successive governments to provide enough housing, healthcare, and other basic services. The Labour Party then formed a coalition with the anti-immigrant New Zealand First Party, a Trump-like formation which has frequently demonised Asian and Muslim immigrants using language very similar to that which appears in the Christchurch Shooters Manifesto. New Zealand First leader Winston Peters is now playing a leading role in determining foreign and defence policy and cementing New Zealand's alignment with US war preparations against China. To prevent public discussion about the striking similarity between Brenton Tarrant's fascist ideology and the racism and xenophobia that's spouted by the political establishment, New Zealand's chief censor has banned the Christchurch Terrorists Manifesto. This blatantly anti-democratic decision means that anyone found in possession of the document is threatened with up to 10 years in prison. The manifesto makes clear Tarrant's hatred of Marxism and socialism, his admiration for the trade unions and their nationalist and anti-immigrant policies, and his sympathy for the military and the police, which he estimates in Europe employ hundreds of thousands of right-wing nationalists. There is palpable anger among masses of people around the world that the Christchurch atrocity, New Zealand's worst ever mass shooting outside wartime, was not prevented, despite the immense resources and powers available to the police and spy agencies in New Zealand and Australia. Not only did these agencies turn a blind eye to multiple warnings of anti-Muslim and neo-Nazi violence, it has been revealed that police deliberately shielded Tarrant. In 2016, the Christchurch shooter sent a death threat to an opponent of the racist United Patriots Front in Australia, which stated, quote, "If you are a Marxist, I hope you one day meet the rope." This threat was reported to police in Melbourne, who dismissed it and made no record of the complaint. The political explanation for this is that the state sympathizes with the extreme right and shares its hostility to Marxism. Governments are terrified by the growing support for socialism among workers and the resurgence of mass strikes and protests in France, Poland, the United States, Mexico, Algeria, India, and many other countries, including in New Zealand. To defend capitalist rule requires police-state measures, including imprisoning journalists and whistleblowers like Assange and Manning, and the mobilization of extreme right-wing forces against the working class. The Christchurch massacre is therefore being exploited to justify attacks on democratic rights, including free speech on the internet, on the pretext of combating hate speech or extremism. Such measures will be used against socialists, anti-war groups and workers, such as the nurses in New Zealand and the Yellow Vests in France, who have organised and shared information on social media. There is widespread opposition to the far right internationally, as demonstrated at vigils throughout New Zealand and Australia, mass protests against Trump's election, and against the Alternative for Germany. Millions of workers and youth can see the danger and are determined to fight to prevent a repeat of the horrors of the 20th century. The vital lesson of the 1930s and 40s is that fascism cannot be defeated by appealing to the state or capitalist parties, but only through the fight to overthrow capitalism and build a socialist society. That is why the urgent political task facing everyone listening today is to join and help build the ICFI and its sections around the world as the conscious socialist leadership of the working class, independent and opposed to the established parties, the trade unions, and their pseudo-left cheerleaders, which have all helped to create the toxic environment of nationalism, xenophobia, and militarism. Thank you.